Hi guys, let's get more news about Warriors. But first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Warriors trade everywhere, showing different sports channels. I had ordered a beer and was scrolling through my phone when I noticed the TV closest to me had first take on. And I wasn't really paying attention until I heard the bartender say something like, "Yo, is that Dave Chappelle?" I looked up and sure enough, there was Dave Chappelle sitting on the first take panel wearing a Warriors hoodie and looking like he was ready to go off about something. Apparently, he was promoting something, but they had him on as a special guest to talk basketball because everyone knows Dave is a huge sports fan who has courtside seats at games all over the country. And when they started discussing the Warriors' injury problems and potential moves to fix their roster, Dave Chappelle delivered some of the most hilarious and insightful basketball analysis I've ever heard from a celebrity guest. The whole bar was watching and laughing by the end of it. Hey, what's up everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second, but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly, the biggest way to support this content. Every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. The whole segment started with the first take panel addressing the absolute disaster that has been the Porzingis acquisition for the Golden State Warriors. Stephen A. Smith was going off about how it took just one game for the nonsense to creep back up, with Porzingis being ruled out for Sunday's game against the Denver Nuggets with an illness and now expected to miss at least the next 2 games because he didn't even make the trip to New Orleans. They showed a clip of Steve Kerr saying that Porzingis woke up feeling really sick and couldn't even make it to the arena, that he was at the hotel and pretty sick, and that Kerr hadn't even talked to him, just got a text in the morning about the situation. Dave Chappelle immediately jumped in and started doing his thing, making jokes about how the Warriors traded Jonathan Kuminga for a guy who can't even get out of bed. He was saying that he's been a basketball fan for decades, and he's never seen a trade fall apart this fast. With the new player missing games before the ink is even dry on the deal, Dave was cracking up the whole panel with his observations. But underneath the humor, there was a real point being made about how the Warriors desperately need healthy bodies, and they traded for a guy with a known chronic illness that affects his availability. The analysts then got into the details of Porzingis' health situation, explaining that he has a condition called POTS, which is an autoimmune disease that he'll deal with for the rest of his professional career. They mentioned that this has been affecting him since last season with the Celtics, and that when he tried to play through it in the postseason, he just wasn't the same player because he couldn't get up and down the floor, he was fatigued and he was a net negative on the basketball courts. Shannon Sharpe made the point that whether it's this illness or the Achilles tendinitis he's dealt with this season, Porzingis simply cannot stay on the basketball court, and that's a massive problem for a team trying to make a playoff push. Dave Chappelle got serious for a moment and talked about how he feels bad for the Warriors fans who were excited about the trade because on paper, Porzingis is actually a really talented player when he's healthy. He mentioned the debut game where Porzingis looked solid with 12 points, a rebound, an assist, and a couple of blocks in just 17 minutes, shooting efficiently, and showcasing the floor spacing and rim protection he was brought in to provide. But then Dave pivoted back to humor, saying that Porzingis played one good game and then immediately got sick like he was allergic to winning or something. The panel was cracking up, but also acknowledging the frustration that Warriors fans must be feeling. The first take panel then showed the stats that have been damning for Porzingis this season, pointing out that he's only played in 18 out of approximately 59 available games. Stephen O was calling it an embarrassment and another indictment on the front office for making a trade that was clearly more about salary dumping Jonathan Kuminga than actually acquiring a useful player. He made the point that nobody wanted Porzingis and nobody wanted Kuminga. and the trade was essentially two teams exchanging players that neither franchise believed in anymore. That's when the conversation shifted to what the Warriors should do to address their roster issues. And this is where Blake Wesley's name came into the discussion. One of the analysts made the point that with Steph Curry still out and expected to miss more time with Porzingis unavailable and with the Warriors relying on guys like Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody, and Santos to carry heavy minutes, the team desperately needs to add depth and scoring punch from somewhere. They mentioned that the Warriors have always been at their best when they have multiple players who can score without dominating the ball and who fit into their motion offense system. Dave Chappelle perked up when they started talking about potential acquisitions because he's apparently been paying close attention to the Warriors' situation and has opinions about what they need. He started talking about how the Warriors' identity has always been about ball movement, cutting, and finding open shots through constant motion, and that any player they add needs to understand that philosophy. Dave mentioned that too many young players come into the league wanting to be the guy and demanding the ball. But the Warriors need role players who can score efficiently within the system without disrupting the flow. That's when they put Blake Wesley's picture up on the screen and started making the case for why he would be a perfect fit for what Golden State is trying to build. The analysts described Wesley as a guard from the San Antonio Spurs who has shown flashes of being able to score in rhythm, create without dominating the ball, and defend on the perimeter. They mentioned that he's still young and developing, but has the kind of skill set that could flourish in the Warriors system if given the opportunity. Dave Chappelle was immediately interested in this idea and started asking questions about Wesley's game, and the analysts broke down his specific abilities. They talked about how Wesley can score quickly without needing a lot of touches, how he moves well without the ball, how he can cut to the basket and find natural shooting opportunities, and how his perimeter defense has been promising. Shannon Sharpe made the point that the Warriors have a history of taking young players with raw talent and developing them into valuable contributors by teaching them how to play within their system, and that Wesley could be the next success story if they can acquire him. The First Take panel then discussed how Wesley would fit into the Warriors' current rotation, especially with all the injuries and absences they're dealing with. They mentioned that guys like Santos and Anthony Melton are being asked to play roles they would never normally play at this stage of their careers. With Santos going from an 8th or 9th man to a starter playing 35-plus minutes a night, the analyst suggested that adding a player like Wesley would take some of that pressure off and give Steve Kerr more options in terms of lineup construction. Dave Chappelle made a really insightful observation about how the Warriors need players who can maintain the team's pace and rhythm even when the stars are out. He talked about how he's watched a lot of Warriors games over the years and how the offense can get stagnant when there aren't enough players who understand the movement and timing that makes their system work. Dave suggested that Wesley's ability to score quickly and move without the ball would help keep the offense flowing even in lineups that don't feature Steph Curry or other primary creators. The discussion then turned to the big win the Warriors had against the Denver Nuggets. And the panel was genuinely impressed with how the team performed without Curry, Porzingis, and Draymond Green. They showed highlights from Brandon Podziemski's incredible fourth quarter where he scored 15 points and grabbed 8 rebounds in just the final 12 minutes, finishing with 18 points, 15 rebounds, and 9 assists overall. Stephen A. was praising Pods for playing cool, calm, and collected, for not trying to force too much, and for showing the kind of decisiveness that veteran players exhibit. Dave Chappelle was loving the Podziemski highlights and started joking that the Warriors might have more success just playing the young guys and letting the veterans rest. He mentioned that Moses Moody has been on fire over the past 6 weeks. That Al Horford looked incredible with 22 points and 6 made threes against Denver, and that the Warriors might actually be better without all the drama and injury concerns that come with their higher paid players. Dave was being somewhat facetious, But the panel acknowledged that there's a real point there about how the young players have been stepping up when given opportunities. The analyst showed the stats on Moses Moody's recent stretch, pointing out that he's averaged 16 points per game on 43% from 3 over his last 11 games. Steve Kerr was quoted saying that Moody has been brilliant for 6 weeks, that he's shooting the lights out, that his confidence has grown, and that he's maybe been their most consistent performer. The panel also praised his improved on-ball defense, noting that he's top of the league against pick-and-roll situations. Dave Chappelle tied this back to the Blake Wesley discussion by saying that the Warriors clearly know how to develop young talent and get the most out of role players who buy into the system. He suggested that if Wesley came to Golden State, he would benefit from the same coaching and culture that has helped Moody improve so dramatically. Dave mentioned that the Warriors have always been good at finding guys who fit their style and then maximizing their abilities through their motion offense and defensive schemes. The First Take panel then discussed Steph Curry's injury situation and his comments about the goal being to be healthy come playoff time. They showed the clip where Curry acknowledged that the Warriors aren't going to be completely healthy in the next month, but that they know where they're slotted in the standings and just want to get into a playoff series and have a chance. The analyst mentioned that the Warriors are currently the 8th seed, but are 8 games above the 11th place Grizzlies, meaning the play-in spots are pretty much locked up for the top 10 teams in the West.